Hello, welcome to Dark Histories. I'm Sarah Lee.
And I'm Josh.
Today we're doing the case of Robert Black, who was a Scottish serial killer in England in the 1980s. This case was a request from Mike Dillon on Facebook, who said that it would be interesting.
Yeah, it certainly is interesting.
Yeah.
So Robert Black, huh?
Yes.
What did you call him? He was Smelly Robert or something.
He was
stank really bad.
smelly Bobby Black or smelly Robert Black for his whole life, like from school through to work, because he just stuck. He looks like he stinks.
You really don't hear. I mean, yes, there are a bunch of smelly people in the world, but
No, this was the one thing that everybody that's ever mentioned him comments on.
Really?
That he has this really bad odor. And the thing I notice the most is the beard. Like he's so like unshaven, unclean, unpresentable.
Okay.
But I will say this case is different from any that we'll probably do in the fact that there's so much information. Like, he was different to most serial killers in the fact that he seemed very talkative.
Oh.
Yeah, no, there was an interview with Ray Wire that's a really famous interview. Ray Wire, I believe, is some form of sex therapist.
Oh, okay.
That was helping the police out, and obviously this guy's a pedophile. He's a real piece of shit. No, he's bad. I mean, I've been researching serial killers since I was about 11, 12 years old.
Mm-hmm.
This is the first one that's got to me like this has. This is bad.
Okay.
Well,
when was he born?
He was born in 1947. He was born illegitimate, so he's got his mother's name on his birth certificate, no father's name, but he never met either of them.
Okay, so what, he was
fostered.
Okay, so he's put up for adoption and that kind of thing.
No, he wasn't put up for adoption. He was fostered at 6 months old. So his mother did have him for 6 months, but obviously he won't remember that.
Yeah.
His mother moved to Australia after he was born, married, had more children. None of them ever knew about him.
Okay.
So, it was a clean, he never met her. I'm going to get into his early life a bit later because it's quite heavy.
Okay.
I'm going to start a bit differently and start with the murders. So we're going to start later. So, 1981 is when the known murders that he's been convicted of started. The first one was Jennifer Cardy, and she wouldn't get, her family wouldn't get a conviction until 2011.
Really? When did this happen?
1981. He got convicted for the other murders in 1990, but they didn't link this one and get enough evidence until 2011. Because you have to imagine in the 1980s, I mean, I'll speak a lot about this because it is an interesting case with where the police were at in terms of technology. And obviously there was no DNA database like there is now. There was nothing like that. Computers were only just starting.
Yeah.
So this little girl, Jennifer Cardy, went missing on August 12th, 1981 from a little village in Ireland. Ireland at that time had a lot of political conflict, like between Northern Ireland and the Republic of Ireland. So there was a lot of violence, but there was never anything like this. It was just unknown.
Yeah.
Like it didn't happen.
Yeah, completely unheard of.
It's quite sad. Her dad bought her a bicycle as a present, a little red bicycle, because she liked red. And she was all excited and she wanted to go ride a bicycle, I believe, to a friend's house. And, the parents were a bit funny about it, but they let her go. She obviously, didn't come home. And they searched for a little bit thinking she might be somewhere close. Couldn't find her, so they called the police in, as you would. and the police didn't find anything either. They didn't find her body until a little bit later. I don't actually have a date on that.
Okay.
Like I said, there's a lot of information in this case, but a lot of it also contradicts itself. So I've had to pull out what I can that's sort of repeated in order to form a factual picture, because I don't like to give misleading information. I'm not just going to read something once and say it's true. I need to back it up.
You got to do your research.
So I don't actually have an exact date for that. But a body was found in a pond by a lay-by. And when the body was found, the pathologist determined that the cause of death was drowning, so she would have been alive when she was put into the water.
Okay.
There was evidence of sexual abuse. I believe her shorts had been replaced, so her underwear had been taken off, and he put the shorts back on in the pond. And there was obviously no leads, and that was basically it until 2011.
All right, so this is 81, you said?
Yes.
All right, so you'd think with something like that, in the water, a lot of people in history have put people in water, dumped bodies in water because it washes away DNA evidence. But in the 80s,
was no DNA evidence.
Well, of course there wouldn't be, because she was in the water. I'm just saying that, especially in like 81, I'm not by any stretch of imagination an expert on the subject, but DNA ain't been that huge of a thing. But
no, I don't think it had anything to do with DNA. I think personally, there's a lot of people that say how he disposed of the bodies was very calculated, and it was meant as like a signal to the police because he couldn't get caught because he just threw them at the side of the road. I don't think it was calculated. I think he just didn't care. And he done with them, and he just found the most convenient spot.
Well, that makes sense.
As I said, she wasn't dead when he left her.
Yeah.
So I don't think he cared.
Okay.
So then we get to the first one that he was convicted for. In 1990, he would have been convicted for 4 kidnappings and 3 murders at that point. So the second one is Susan Maxwell. She was probably the most publicised one as well. She went missing from Tweed, which is a little town bordering England and Scotland. All these locations do become relevant. She went missing on the 30th of July 1982, and she was 11 years old. She'd gone to play tennis with a friend. She'd walked up there. It was about 2 miles. She'd apparently got to the tennis court, played tennis with a friend. Her friend had seen her. Her friend had gone home. She'd walked home. Her mother went to pick her up, I believe, because she felt bad for her walking all the way back. And she wasn't there. So she called her friend's mother. Her friend had got home. She hadn't. And then again, there was a really big search party, and nothing was found until August the 13th, when the body was found by a man called Arthur Meadows, 250 miles away from where she disappeared.
Oh, wow.
In a ditch next to a lay-by on the A518 near Lockley in England, which is sort of Midlands. You'll find that all the bodies were found in sort of a triangle. They call it Midlands Triangle.
And I'm assuming by the name Midlands, it's like Middle England.
Yeah.
Okay.
He was a van driver.
Oh. Now, van, did he, like, when you think American, when you say vans, you generally have, like, your minivans, your soccer mom vans, you have your, you do have larger, full-blown vans, but, what did he...
It's that sort of thing. It's your big, classic white van that transport things that don't need something as big as you'd call it a truck.
All right.
We'd call it a lorry.
Oh, yeah. Oh, okay. So pretty much he just wrote free candy on the side of his van or something?
This is something I did actually want to speak about. These interviews that I mentioned with Ray Wyatt, they are available to listen to. I would not recommend it. I really wouldn't. I mean, obviously they're out there. If someone wants to listen to them, they can listen to them, but it's on you. It's hard. I was crying. I couldn't get through it.
Okay.
But what I did notice was that the way he talks is kind of like, even though he's talking to an adult about adult problems, he's talking as if he's telling a story to a child. Like, it sounds very like, it's really creepy.
Okay.
So I can see just from listening to those tapes how he could get the little girls into a van.
Okay. And it was just little girls, though, no boys.
Little girls, okay. Just little girls. We will come to that a bit later. Well, something about that.
Okay. So.
Yeah, this is going to be a tricky one. We're going to have to stop and get the timeline right every now and then, just so we know where we are. Like I said, a lot of information.
All right. So he was a van driver.
He was.
But was he transporting stuff?
Yeah, he worked for a poster distribution company. So, like, you get billboards on the side of the road, and he'd be transporting the posters to go in the billboards.
Okay.
He worked there, as far as I know, all of his adult life.
All right.
So you find a lot of serial killers have these kind of jobs because it's easy to get from one place to another, and it's really hard for people to catch them, because even in England and Scotland and Ireland, actually, just like America, although we don't have states, the counties have their own police departments. They don't necessarily share information. It can get tricky if you're moving from one place to another. Well, to some degree,
you wouldn't think to share information, because
don't.
Without a hard line connection, you wouldn't.
I mean, luckily in this case, well, after the next case, because of where the bodies were found, they did think very early on that he was some sort of transport person. Okay. That he drove for a living. So yeah, after Susan was found, Caroline Hogg went missing in Edinburgh, and this one's heartbreaking. This one absolutely kills me. She went missing on the 8th of July 1983. She was 5 years old. She lived in a really small sort of village. It was a very tight-knit community, so everyone knew each other, that sort of thing. And she lived just down the road from a little play area. And just a bit further from this play area was a fun fair, like a permanent fun fair. She'd asked her mum if she could play out for 5 minutes. And because she's so young, the mum obviously doesn't want her to go very far. So she lets her go to the play area because it's not very far, but she's never allowed to the fun fair because it's always so busy.
Yeah.
So she knows this is the rule. You don't go to the fun fair on your own. You go to the playground. So she goes to the playground, and obviously her mother, I think her mother sent her brother out looking for her. But yeah, she went to go try and get her to come back. She wasn't there. They called the police pretty much straight away. A lot of people were interviewed, and she was seen holding hands with a scruffy looking man at this fun fair. That was the description that was given. It was just a scruffy looking man. And then they got a search party. I think the search party got to about 2,000 people. It's like the biggest search for a person in Edinburgh ever.
Okay.
And her body wasn't found till 10 days later, on the 18th of July. And that was found at the side of the road in a ditch next to the A44 along the route from Northampton to Coventry. So that's 300 miles away from where she disappeared. But it's 24 miles away from where Susan was found.
Okay.
So at this time, obviously, the police thought there's some kind of link.
Yeah.
And I believe that about 3 different police forces came into working on this together. But it was very hard because I think the person that was put in charge of the investigation wanted to get all the details onto computers, so they had some sort of reference and some sort of thing that could flag up if a name came up a few times or a license plate came up a few times or something like that. But the difficulty was that there's that much information. They had thousands of leads coming in that they were just writing down on paper. Everything was done manually with Susan. So by the time Caroline went missing, in order to get all her information on the computer and then compare it to Susan's, it would take a hell of a long time.
Yeah.
So it was just a bit of a mess, really. They didn't know what to do. I did miss out that when she was found, the body was obviously very decomposed. They couldn't establish a cause of death. But again, sexual abuse was evident. I think Caroline was left in the ditch completely naked. So
Okay.
obviously you could see, a 5-year-old girl, that's horrible.
Well, yeah.
So yeah, that was the second one. And then the third one that became linked was Sarah Harper, and this was just down the road from where I live. She was 10 years old, and she was kidnapped from Morley in Leeds on the 12th of May 1986. She'd gone to the shop for a mum to get a loaf of bread. The shop was 10 minutes away. It was just out of the house, through a little alleyway.
Mm-hmm.
The shop was there. So it would have been about 20 minutes all in all for her to get to the shop and back, but obviously she didn't arrive home. The shopkeeper had said she got to the shop, she'd bought the loaf of bread, she'd seen her on her way home going through the alleyway. I believe when people were interviewed, they had spotted a white van just outside Sarah's house. But again, no one could find her. And then she was found on the 19th of April 1986 by David Malt, who found her body in the River Trent in Northampton, which again was very close to where the other people were found. It was in a triangle, as I'd said. And it's really strange because a lot of serial killers tend to operate in a triangle. You'll find eventually we will do the Moors murders. That's another famous English case. And they were caught eventually because they'd also kidnapped children in a triangle.
Okay.
Serial killers tend to do that. They don't want to do it too close to where they are. And I believe it's been said that he loved the Midlands, so he'd try go there whenever he could. And yeah, they don't like to do it right where they are so they're not found, but they tend to go in a little triangle around them. I don't know if that's intentional or if that's just something that happens, but it happens a lot. But the police didn't link that case for another 8 months to the cases of Susan and Caroline because she was taken from a residential area. She wasn't taken along a route to anywhere. And when the pathologist found Sarah's body, it was a lot more extreme. The pathologist had said it was the most terrible thing she'd ever seen. This body had been violated in so many ways that they thought it was someone else, which to me is very, I'm not sure about you, but my opinion on that is that that's very naive to think, because it's been known, even from the 70s with Ted Bundy in America, as killers go on, they get more confidence and they tend to do more extreme things.
Certainly cockier.
So I think it's very naive for, even in the 80s, for police to decide that because the, murder was more violent, it wasn't the same person.
Yeah, no, I could see that.
And then this is where, though, it does get interesting in the technology part, because the Home Office donated a computer system that they'd started working on to them, where they'd started a little database of criminals and names and license plates. I believe that was called HOME. I can't remember what it stood for. Home Office Major Inquiries System or something. And yeah, so as they put information in that, it would flag up if a license plate came up twice, if a name came up twice. like they'd wanted it to all along. But unfortunately, because Robert's convictions were so long ago, he wasn't on that system, so it completely slipped through. His name just wasn't there. And then we come to his last victim, well, known victim, who was convicted of kidnapping, and this one's just unbelievable, really. It was a little girl called Mandy Wilson. She was 6 years old. This was in 1990, and her next door neighbour, David, was mowing his lawn, and he saw a van pull up, and he saw this little girl talking to this man in a van. I think he'd put his head down to check something on his lawnmower, and as he looked up, he saw this man looking like he was bundling something into the van. He couldn't see the little girl, but he knew it was the little girl. So obviously he called the police. This man drove away. He'd managed to take down the license plate number, which obviously helped a lot. But what is extraordinary to me is he was eventually caught because he drove right past where he took her. And David shouted, that's her. The nearest police officer ran to apprehend him, stop the van, and he found his own daughter in the van. So that, for me, would be...
the police officer's daughter?
Yeah. So I don't believe the police officer knew who was in the van at that time. I don't think there was a name given. I think it was just, a little girl's been taken.
Oh, yeah. She just got picked up. You wouldn't have a clue who it was. You just call the cops. Okay, so how old was the girl?
She was 6.
6, which means she wasn't far away from her home.
Oh, she was right outside.
And her father being police, I don't know about you. If I'd have gotten a phone call like that in that neighborhood, I'd have, that's
obviously, you wouldn't be happy. Well, it would go through your mind, I expect. But yeah, he said it took all the strength he had not to just strangle him, which isn't surprising. Luckily, the little girl didn't die, but she was tied up very tightly. She was struggling to breathe a bit, and there was some bruising found on her vagina, though Robert would later adamantly deny that he touched her, and said the bruising was there before, which is kind of strange because he's very open about his crimes.
Yeah.
But obviously I don't believe him there. I don't think there'd be any reason for the 6-year-old's vagina to be bruised.
I couldn't imagine. No, I obviously couldn't imagine there being a good reason. Then again, I'm not a girl.
So obviously from that, he's caught red-handed, he's arrested.
Oh, yeah.
They immediately link it. Well, they don't. They immediately think that he has, taken these other girls.
Did he confess to him? Or?
No. What happened was they had to get in touch with the company who worked for the poster distribution company. And they found it was him from pay slips saying that he'd been taking these routes, and then fuel receipts saying that he was filling up just by these places on these dates around these times. It was a very long investigation. I don't think the trial actually went ahead for the other girls for another 2-3 years. And then, as I said, poor Jennifer's family had to wait till 2011. So, the obvious place to go from here, before I give a little list of people that they think he murdered but he never got convicted of, is to obviously talk about the man himself, which is the hard part. So, as I said, he was born illegitimate. He was fostered out. It was believed that his foster parents physically abused him, but we don't have any evidence of that. None at all. Other than him saying so, I think. He was obviously picked on a little bit at school because he smelled bad.
Yeah, well, I can imagine you would be.
But the worst part and the most interesting part, I guess, for me is it was about 8 years old, he says, that he started developing these sexual obsessions with babies and little girls. And he'd started fantasizing and fixating on how much you could fit inside holes, basically, like orifices, because obviously they stretch, etc., etc.
You got a question to ask yourself. You know, nowadays, as sad as it is, any child with internet access, which spoiler alert, every child has access to a phone, a tablet, a computer, something like that. And, they can search the most ridiculous of things and up pops something that's pornographic. Now, I know that when I was growing up, we didn't have that kind of stuff. But the first time I ever saw a woman naked, I had no idea what I was looking at.
Yeah.
It was like, imagine seeing arms and legs and a head and feet, and, if they're wearing shorts, you see their calves, and then all of a sudden, what is that?
Yeah.
In his case, where did he see this? How did he come up with this question? How did
he? This is what I thought. He was known to be sexually abused later, after his foster parents had died. I think his foster mother died first, and his foster father died first. Sorry, and his foster mother died 6 years later, and he was put into care.
I know, but I'm talking about when he was 8.
Yeah, this is what I'm saying. I don't understand where that came from. Apparently, he did have a fixation with like looking up girls' skirts at school, things like this.
And I'm not going to say boys will be boys.
Oh yeah, I know.
You can't say that.
That is something
it's a terrible thing to say, but it's like, ooh, what's that? Curiosity killed the cat.
Oh yeah, but there's a difference between natural curiosity and thinking how much can I fit inside someone's vagina.
Well, exactly. I have to question how he led himself to that at 8. I mean, that seems incredibly early. I mean, 8 years old. I don't know about when you were 8. When I was 8, I was trying to build tree houses, and
I was playing Pokemon.
Yeah.
That's it. That was my whole existence at 8.
That's what I'm saying. So, he wanted to pull a DD, find out what this button did, and well, I just have to question how he led himself.
He's also said that he began masturbating at 8 and inserting things inside himself.
Again, you just, what did he see? What was he told?
I mean, there must have been something, because as a child, you don't just do that.
I mean, that's where poop comes from. You gotta,
I guess it's probably different for boys than girls. I think there's so much stigma around how girls act, and girls are taught from a very young age, stay away from boys. You can get pregnant, there's this, there's that.
Yeah.
But I should imagine, it's natural for a boy to start touching himself and being a bit curious. But I've never ever heard of an 8-year-old masturbating by inserting things inside his anus. And apparently these things were like big bits of metal. And when the police raided his house in 1990, they found pictures of him like dressed up in little girls' clothes with like wine bottles up him.
Wine bottles?
Wine bottles.
Oh, God. Okay.
Like, his fixation was literally how much can go in there.
All right, so, not to sound awful or anything, so he was technically just a male size queen. Trying to figure out what the maximum amount of punishment could be taken.
Yeah.
I mean, okay, so he was fostered at a very young age.
He was.
From 6 months.
Yes.
Started masturbating, not just masturbating, which is, I'm saying 8's kind of early, but, because most kids don't go through puberty until at earliest 10, and those are just girls. I mean, guys take forever to go through puberty. But he starts experimenting with his rectum.
Yes.
I mean, you listen to any other serial killer that has done anything, and not just pedophiles, but like Ted Bundy, Jeffrey Dahmer, all these other big names. They've got something. They have been abused somehow as a child. What?
I was trying to style it out again.
Oh, what, you burped?
Yeah.
So?
I did that last time. I keep trying to style it out like I haven't done something.
Oh no, I burped too. Hey, ladies and gentlemen, she burped.
I'm sorry.
Nah, it's okay. I'm sure they don't mind. You just, where was I? Yeah, they've had some kind of abuse.
Yeah.
The thing is, this is something you see. I mean, you could go your whole life not knowing anything other than, okay, well, missionary. And then, ooh, let's try doggy style, that kind of thing.
Yeah,
but
you don't
that
automatically
is such
jump to
an extreme, like that's going from normal masturbation to some highly vampiric BDSM crazy crap.
I mean,
at 8.
As I said, he was known to be sexually abused in a boys' home when he was about 12, but which is terrible. But
of course it is.
I mean, he says in his own words that this all started when he was 8, which is pretty terrifying.
Just, maybe we'll never know, but it just seems like something had to have happened by 8. Or maybe he just thinks it was 8. Maybe he doesn't know.
I guess your memory does sometimes as you get older.
Yeah.
Sort of.
Maybe it started, maybe his memory got to where he believed it started before he was abused at the boys' home.
Because it would make more sense.
That's what I'm saying.
I mean, I don't know. Like I said, I find it really hard with this case because I did listen to these tapes, and he is very open. He's very candid.
Yeah.
He's talking in extreme detail about what he's done to these little girls, what he's done to himself.
Yeah.
It's horrible, but yeah, he's adamant he was 8. The other big theme that I saw was him adamantly every now and then stating that he wasn't homosexual. Like, he was adamant that he was not homosexual. The only reason he put things inside himself is because he didn't have a vagina, in his words.
Okay.
Which to me is strange. There's obviously, I mean, you could explain, I guess, the stigma towards I'm not homosexual on the abuse.
Yeah. I mean,
I guess.
I mean, I don't know. He was abused in a boys' home. I'm assuming that it wasn't abused by a girl. So,
No, it was a man. It was one of the men caring for them, and apparently they had a system where someone was chosen, sort of thing.
Mm-hmm.
He would be abused. Once that child left, he nominated another child, and then that child took over.
So somebody nominated, a boy nominated him to be the abusee.
To be abused, yeah.
And then he eventually left, nominating someone else.
Yeah.
So it's a vicious cycle.
It's not good, but I mean, without sounding absolutely awful, there is so many people that have been abused in care homes and stuff like this. There was a whole major inquiry about it a few years ago. Historic abuse in care homes, and you don't go on to murder little girls. You just don't.
Yeah. I mean, okay, so my theory at this point is he was abused at the boys' home at 12. He spent so much time believing that he was putting emphasis on he's not gay.
Yes.
He did put stuff inside of him because he didn't have a vagina, he isn't gay. But that's where if his memory was bad, that's where it all started. Being subject to such abuse would open up his eyes to other things, while saying that he's not homosexual. He's so interested in the vagina, or puts so much effort into it, that the dominoes start to fall down. He ends up here.
Yes.
Okay. I mean, again, that's just a theory, but you know, 8 years old is a bit young, and if there's for sure 12 abuse, that would explain quite a bit. I mean,
he also put a lot of it down to his girlfriend leaving him. He had one girlfriend in his whole life, Pamela Hodge, I think she was called. I don't think it was a long relationship. I think it was about a year. He asked her to marry him. She left him.
Okay.
Sort of thing. But again, how many people has that happened to?
Yeah.
You know, there's just no excuse. In my eyes, this man is the worst one I've come across because there's just, like I said, yeah, he had a bad childhood. But there's just nothing to, I mean, yeah, these things aren't normal, but they're not so uncommon.
Yeah, it's not one of those things that you should pay forward.
Yeah.
You know, the idea.
I mean, obviously, there's never an excuse for this, but with a lot of serial killers, there's a lot more obvious sort of this led to this.
Yeah.
There is nothing here that suggests to me that an 8-year-old boy would be thinking about the things he thought about and would go on to, you know, do the things he did. Sorry, I've lost myself.
That's okay.
Because, like I said, this one really gets to me. For me, this one is hard because I've always looked at things based on the nature or nurture argument. That's how I look at things, how I analyze it. And this is the first case that I just can't see 100% nurture leading to this. I just can't. I don't believe that it's possible that people are born bad. I don't. Everyone's born a little baby. But this one's just weird.
Yeah, I really don't know how to go about this one. I mean,
yeah, that's what I mean. It's awful.
There's a lot of loose connections.
There is. There is. Obviously, all we've got to go on, even though there's tons of information, a lot of it is fairly useless.
I find it really ridiculous going back to the boys' home, you know, where you have to nominate another, you know, somebody else as soon as you leave, you know.
Yeah.
That's got to weigh on you. I mean, quite a bit. I could imagine that's going to weigh on you.
Oh, of course. I mean, that's
eventually snapped and probably got to the point where he just didn't care. The most dangerous feeling in the world is not caring.
Yeah, I mean, like I said, I see the not caring in how he disposed of the bodies, though other people say it was calculated. I don't think it was calculated at all.
Well, it clearly wasn't calculated. He drove right by the little 6-year-old's house again. I mean...
Yeah, as I said, every serial killer I've come across has this pattern of getting more confident, getting more extreme, getting... which is, I mean, I guess how they caught, but I do want to finish just to show a little bit of respect. I want to just run through a list of victims that never got a conviction, but the police say they're 80% sure that it was Robert who took these little girls.
Yeah.
So there's a little girl called April Fab who was taken off her bicycle in Norfolk in 1969, which is a long time before the murders he were convicted of happened, but he was definitely old enough to do this. And again, he was taken straight off a bicycle. That's something that's happened twice that we know of. There was 9-year-old Christine Markham from Scunthorpe in 1973. She disappeared as well. Both these cases, I will say, they never found a body. They still haven't. 13-year-old Janet Tate went missing from Devon in 1978, and this one kind of kills me a little bit because they were building up a case against him for Janet Tate, and he would have got convicted of it had he not died in prison of a heart attack in 2016. I think it was a heart attack. If I'm wrong, someone can correct me, but again, this was one where there's lots of information, but a lot of it was contradictory. Like, I had one thing saying he died of natural causes, but the most common seems to be that it was a heart attack. Are you Googling?
Oh, I'm good. Yeah, he died in Magaberry Prison in January 2016.
Yeah.
Yeah, right here. It's only got him.
I don't know how you pronounce that prison name either. It's not from.
Magha Berry, the Scottish.
Marbury. Yeah, I don't know. That's a long way from me.
Serial killer. Huh. Interesting. It says here actually that it's only got 4+, and he was at the Musselburgh Grammar School. Okay. Oh, that's him, isn't it?
Yeah.
That is a.
He's if anyone were to look like a serial killer, I would say he does. That could be very offensive to some people, but
Well, I'm not going to say he looks like a serial. I mean, what does a serial killer look like?
Him.
You know.
I'm sorry, but if I
okay.
saw him on the street, I would be terrified of him just from looking at him.
I mean, you look at him. He's just got white hair. He's bald. He's got a
Well, at the
crown.
time, he had very dark black hair, and
Yeah,
it was a huge beard, and he looked very unkempt. I thought you were looking at like a younger picture of him.
Well, yeah. I mean, I'm just saying, like, even at that point, he looks like some biker.
Mm.
I mean, I don't know.
I can
if he
see
was
how
a biker,
you'd say that. But yeah, poor Janet Tate's family just missed a conviction. Which would, and again, her body was never found as far as I know. And there was 14-year-old Susan Lawrence, who was found dead in Essex in 1979. 16-year-old Colette Harum, who was found sexually assaulted and strangled in a field in Nottingham in 1983. Patsy Marnes, I think it is, found dead in Heathrow in 1990.
Okay.
So that's quite a few girls whose families...
I have no idea.
But here's the thing for me, like I had to read that list out because, like I said, the police are pretty adamant that it was Robert Black who took these little girls. And the issue for me with that is, what if it isn't? They're not looking at these cases now because they're convinced it's Robert Black. They focused all their attention on trying to link these cases to Robert Black, that they're not looking elsewhere. I mean, what if it was another person?
What if they were each individual?
Exactly.
Yeah,
that's
okay.
I mean, I can see where there's a link, and I think that's great and everything, but these poor families are still waiting to know what happened to the children.
Yeah.
And it could have been like, although, yeah, it's very possible it was Robert Black, there's a lot of nasty people out there.
Yeah.
And that kind of really got to me. So yeah, that's about all I've got on him. Unless there's anything else you need to.
I can't really think of anything else. It's just, I don't believe it was 8. If he got to that boy's home and recognizes it at 12, I don't know what my memory's going to be like when I'm, in my 60s.
It is a thing. You do remember things slightly different as you get older. You'll misplace dates sometimes. I mean, I did this as a request for a person who said, he's an interesting one. I'll definitely say it's the only one that's got to me like this. And I've researched a hell of a lot of people, so he's definitely right on that one. But hopefully we will find a bit of a lighter one for next week.
I'm sure we'll be fine.
Okay.